Well, on behalf of the Microscopy Society of America Student Council, I would like to thank everyone for attending today. My name is Laura Wilson. I'm on the Student Council, and I will be hosting the webinar today, which is our third of the Microscopy Careers mini-series, this one focusing on industry careers. So first off, I would like to welcome and thank our panelists. We have three great panelists today, and if I could have each of you please introduce yourself and say where you're at, what your job's like, title, and how long you've been there. And we'll start with Lucille.
Hi, I'm Lucille Giannuzzi. I actually have three job titles, and I run two companies myself, both a consulting company and a sample preparation product company, as well as working for TestScan USA. So, like I said, I do consulting, mostly FIB, TEM, characterization, and then Expressflow LLC sells ex situ lift out and related sample preparation equipment for FIB. And I'm the regional sales manager for TestScan USA for Mid-Atlantic. So then I sell SEMs and FIBs for TestScan. And I've been with TestScan for 2 years. With Expressflow spun off from my consulting roughly 8 years, and then consulting for over 10 years. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Tracy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Lovejoy from Neon. I'm the CEO, so I run the business side of the operation. And if you know anything about Neon, you know that our business is science. So we do a lot of cutting edge microscopy work and development of latest microscope technology and developments. And let's see, I've been there since 2010, straight after my PhD. So coming up on 11 years, October will be 11 years. But when I got started, I was just a lowly scientist getting the X-ray detector working on the neon microscope, and then in the monochromator developments, and then later went on to design a spectrometer. So it's been an interesting road.
Great, thanks. And last but not least, how about Mike?
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Tolson. I am the general manager for Element Pi. We're actually a distributor here in the US for a couple of different product lines. One is a microscope line out of Korea. Another is a sputter coater and thermal evaporator line out of the United Kingdom. And we also are the representative in the US for MicroPrep, which is a tool used for improving the throughput on a FIB workflow typically, and also used to make samples for atom probe and TEM and X-ray microscopy. I started this company, I think, 2016, and before that, I was I worked with Hitachi for a while, and also with a company called Aspects, which was acquired by FEI many years ago, back 2012 maybe, I guess. Yeah, it's been that long already. I can't believe it. Yeah, so we're based, we cover the whole US, and I have sales reps around the country. Probably some people that Lucille knows, I'm sure. Yeah, we're looking forward to helping you out here. So.
Great, thank you very much. So how this is going to go from here, I have some prepared questions that I'll ask, but if anybody who's watching and has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. They can either go into just sent to everyone, or you can send them to me and we will get them asked. And you can do that anytime. But I guess for starters, I will go with, could you talk a little bit about your transition from academia into industry? And again, we'll start with Lucille.
Yeah, so actually, that transition was very apropos. I did 14 years of education, bachelor's, master's, PhD, and postdoc. And then I was on the faculty at the University of Central Florida for 10 years. And went to full professor, tenured position. And then I went into industry, where I was a product marketing engineer for, at that time, FEI company, selling or basically doing technical sales for FIB and SEMs. So that transition was extremely interesting, extremely and at the time, the reason for doing that was to basically get to work with the latest and greatest instrumentation. And the advantages to it were the interaction with a lot of customers, a lot of state-of-the-art research. I was able to develop a lot of techniques and methods, while still continuing professionally publishing and presenting at conferences. And that was really my choice, which I was able to do. So that was extremely rewarding. And then from there, I basically have just continued on doing multiple careers. But the transition was very rewarding. And one of the major things that's different in industry versus academia is the amount of teamwork that goes into various projects. Whereas in academia, a lot of times you're working by yourself or maybe with a very small group. In industry, it's a much larger teamwork effort.
Great, thanks. How about you, Tracy? Could you talk about your transition?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I came to Neon after my PhD at the University of Washington, and I was kind of scoping out the local industrial scene because the whole academic kind of grind of, you know, postdoc 1, maybe postdoc 2, maybe postdoc 3, and then fighting for a faculty position and probably having to move each time. It didn't appeal to me for my personal life. And also I felt something similar to what Lucille was saying, that in the academic developments in academia, the sort of technological advances that are possible are fairly limited because, you know, a postdoc might have 1 or 2 years total time, and that's not really enough time to do something really new. You kind of have to take just one next step. So if you want to actually do something that's never been done before, that tends to take a little bit more time, and it takes a team. It takes a bigger team than you usually have in an academic setting. So those things really appealed to me. And then I started at Neon, and it really captured my imagination to see, you know, what could be done over the next 3 years of development, you know, 5 years of development, working with a whole team, trying to build the best microscope in the world. So.
Great, thank you. Yeah. And how about you, Mike?
Yeah, well, as far as my transition from academia to industry, my hair kind of gives me away. That happened a long time ago. In a day and age when there was no cell phones, there was no computers, there was definitely no smartphone. We didn't even have personal computers. We had the old big giant IBM with punch cards and a green CRT. So finding a job back in those days was a lot different than it is now, obviously. So I don't know that any of that experience would really be useful in this day and age. So maybe I'll talk more about how I transitioned from industry as an engineer into industry related to microscopy. And that happened, you know, as a salesperson, I really liked electron microscopes because I just thought they were the one of the neatest things in the world. They can be done with you can do so much with them, and they apply to so many different industries and so many different applications. And I think my first delve into it was at PitCon, a big trade show. I went there and started talking to I was already selling other related scientific instruments, but I wanted to get into this microscopy area, and went to Pittcon and talked to a lot of the companies there that were showing electron microscopes, and ended up moving into that with Hitachi, or with Aspects actually, that I mentioned earlier, and have been in it ever since, and really like it. I find it's just an amazing tool that allows people to do a lot more. All the other instrumentation I was selling before just generated a lot of numbers and data, and so you had to sit there and interpret the data. Where I guess a microscope, because picture's worth 1,000 words, provides, it's more personal. There's more interaction and interest. I mean, it appeals to grade school children all the way to people my age. So, I learn something new every day. It seems like in the field of microscopy, and so it's never boring. That's for sure. So
Great. Yeah. Thank you. So maybe this question could go more for Lucille or Tracy. So can you expand a little bit on some of the differences working in industry versus when you were in academia, Lucille?
Yeah, sure. In academia, obviously your focus really is in education, educating via classwork, educating via your graduate students. The entrepreneurial aspect of academia is very similar to running a small business like the two companies that I do, because basically you have to hustle to find money to keep your business going, hustle to find money to keep your research grants going in the case of academia. But there's like I said, that well, I'd say one of the major things that's different with regards to research is you're constantly teaching a new bunch of students coming through, and Tracy alluded to this earlier with a postdoc. And so your goal is to educate people, and right at about the time when they're perfectly educated and they can run the lab and they can run all instruments, they graduated and they're out the door, and you have to kind of start all over again. So that's kind of hard, but it goes with the territory because you're in the business of education. With industry, obviously, it's a lot different. You train people, and then everybody works in teams, as we said earlier. But the pace is much faster, or can be much faster. So the equivalent of a master's thesis, which may take somebody 2 years to complete, now that kind of research gets done in days to weeks. And similarly, the equivalent of a PhD thesis, the research part of it, may get done in weeks to months. So the pace is a lot quicker as far as the types of things that get done. And that's all related also to the fact that those people are basically already trained, right? So they know how to do what they are supposed to be doing. And so the pace is much quicker. So I'll let Tracy take over and add to any of that.
Well, I mean, I agree completely on the personnel side. I mean, in graduate school, once you get good at your job, you leave. It's a very industrial perspective. Once you get good at your job, you stay at your job. But there's also the experiment side, which is sort of related, similar story. In graduate school, you get good at running your experiment and you graduate. In industry, you get good at running your experiment, and that means that one's working and it's time to ship it to the customer so they can use it. And you got to train the customer how to use it, and then you've got another one that you've got to get working because that's going to a different, another customer. And so, these days, most, at least in experimental physics, there's a company involved in producing the instrumentation that's needed to do the science. And those companies are really, especially the microscopy case, the companies really have the expertise for the instrumentation development, and the development that's done in academia, well, partially because of the academic student life cycle of being just a few years, it tends to be, and the training issue that Lucille mentioned, it tends to be much smaller scale. So the projects that you can tackle in academia tend to be smaller scale, more focused on the science, whereas the new developments in instrumentation are mostly in the industry, in the industrial camp.
Great. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or?
No, I think you're okay to
All
proceed.
right. So then I'll keep asking some of the prepared questions, but again, if anybody in the audience has questions, feel free to put them in the chat and they'll get asked. So, all right. So next, maybe the three of you, could you touch on some advice that you might have for students, young professionals who are looking to get into industry, like as far as hiring goes, what's some advice that you might have for students?
Yeah, I can start on that one if you want. This is Mike. Yeah, I think the best advice I could give anybody would be to realize that I think the most important skill you learn in academic when you're in college is learning how to solve problems. And you'll probably find out really quickly, as I did, that I had a degree in mechanical engineering, and I don't think I've done a whole lot of mechanical engineering since I got out of college, but I certainly used a lot of the problem solving skills that I had in learning how to research the background and establish the rules and the objective, and figure out a plan and proceed that way. And so, life is always a set of learning activities. We're always learning something new. And the main thing in this day and age, and it's obvious right here in this webinar, I mean, all five of us look like we're working from home. I think maybe Laura might look like you might be in an office complex, but working from home, you got to be pretty much a self-starter and self-motivated, and not be willing to kind of get things done on your own, and not expect somebody to spoon feed every little bit of information to you. That sometimes you have to go hunt for the things and figure out a solution on your own, and know where to ask, knowing what to ask. And that's the main things that I think you need to be prepared for when you get out in the industrial world anyway.
Great, thanks, good advice. How about Tracy, do you have anything to add to that, or Lucille?
I can add. So yeah, if you're looking for a job, go to our website, neon.com/careers. But no, seriously, like Mike was saying, being a self-starter, that's key. And another thing I would say is there's a transition, there's a phase change from when you're doing your job to looking for a job. So when you're still doing your job, do it well, right? Well, doesn't matter what it is, just be the world expert at that little sliver of the world of science that you're doing. That you want to be able to be just standing out above everyone else, because in your little area of specialty, you should be the expert, the world expert in that. And because that's what employers are going to be looking for. They're going to be looking for a self-starter, like Mike said, and they're going to be looking for someone who can take a problem and excel at it. And chances are that particular problem is not going to be particularly relevant to what you're doing in industry. But the fact that you excelled at it, that's what the employer is going to be looking for. That's what we look for.
Great.
Yeah, and just to add to that, particularly with what Mike said, basically you're learning how to learn. So you need to translate the skills that you're learning now, as Mike said, into what desirable skills that an employee is asking for. With regards to organization, leadership, one of the big things is communication skills. That's a big thing for me, is both written and oral communication skills are huge. How do you resolve conflict? Have you mentored people or worked with people? Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it, but the big thing is transitioning what you're doing now into skills that are applicable to what folks are looking for.
Great, thank you for that. No questions from the audience yet, which is fine. I have a list that we can keep going. So you've all touched on some of the skills and these broad concepts that students should have or should keep in mind for when looking for jobs. But if we go a little more specific, is there something from your experience with your company that you weren't prepared for by school that you kind of wish you had known before? Mike?
Oh, sure. There's so many. I'm trying to figure out what's the best one to talk about. I would, just from what we see about one third to one half of our customers have never used an electron microscope before. It's, we sell an entry level system, a fairly, well, it's all relative. It's not $1 million. But it's got 4 zeros or 5 zeros instead of 6 zeros behind the number. But anyway, so what we find is that a lot of our customers realize they need something, but they don't have people that are trained in it. I think there's just not enough hands-on experience, especially at the undergraduate level in universities these days, where students can have a little bit of hands-on experience, so that, and not just with microscopes, but with anything. So when they get out in the industrial world, it won't be a 100% new activity. They'll at least be a little bit familiar with the vocabulary and things like that. But it's just so broad. The field of science is so broad that it's hard to be expert at everything. And even being having some exposure to everything is not easy sometimes. So. But it's amazing how many times we've had to train somebody from the really basic level of, this is the periodic table, and start there and go up. And I'm not saying it is because a lot of our customers are they're problem solvers, and they haven't been digging into the science for years and years, so they've probably forgotten a lot of what they learned. So we have to be prepared to do a lot of education when we get out there, and kind of help them make use of the tools that they realize that they need to use. So
yeah, great. But Lucille?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me that I wish I would have spent more time on as a student is the business aspect of selling or marketing or what have you. I mean, if you're in industry, period, you're in the market of selling something. And we're all in microscopy fields, so we're all in the business of selling something related to microscopy. So I think if while you're in graduate school, if you can take some sort of business class, if you have time for like a marketing class or a sales class or something in the business school, that would be great. Part of me wished I would have gotten an MBA, just again, just to have that extra added business aspect of the industry, because we're all well versed in the technical field for the most part. So it's learning really the business part of it. And while you're in school, I would say if you have the time, definitely take it up. If you don't have the time to take a class, definitely read some books about it. One of the things I can say is that by nature, most scientists and engineers are really good at marketing, because you're trying to always, when you write a paper or when you give a presentation, you're always proving to the audience, this is why I did it, this is how I did it, and this is why what I did is so great. And that inherently is what you do when you sell technical stuff as well. So, but the language is a bit different. And so just spending a little time on the business side to learn the different language would be really good to have.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know a lot of grad students or students, it's hard to find time to do those things, but there's a lot of online resources for getting some of that business type education and knowledge. So Tracy, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I guess my perspective is a little bit different. I mean, I would say when you're in graduate school, like when you need to know the business jargon, you can pick up a book, fast track to MBA or whatever, and read it in a weekend, and then you'll be kind of up to speed on that. I would focus on the thing you're doing and doing it well. But there, in related, there are a lot of things that happen in academia that happen in industry as well. And if you can try to get experience with those, it's really useful, like writing grants. My advisor was really good about getting the graduate students involved in writing the grants, and there were some graduate student support grants, like a IGERT traineeship, that we had to write our own proposal justifying our own research. And that was really useful experience I found in industry, because, well, first of all, there are just grants for industry. Like there's small business innovation research grants that you can get in industry to do new developments. And then there's also, those skills for grants, you're going to have customers who are writing grants to try to buy your products. And you want to understand that process inside and out, because that's going to be part of the life cycle of the product. Is how, that's the first step, is that there's some professor somewhere or whatever their job title is, who's getting funding for that, to buy that instrument. And it doesn't matter if it has 3 zeros or 6 zeros, there's a grant proposal behind it somewhere that made it happen. So having that skills with that kind of thing is really useful.
All right, great. Thank you for that. All right, well, let's, so maybe if you could talk about something about the cult.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe we should go through, I mean, it looks like there's five people here. Maybe we should go through and see who they are. I mean, that's kind of interesting to hear. Well, I don't know, you're running it, but I'd be curious for me.
Yeah, does anyone in the audience want to turn their cameras or speak or anything? Go for it.
Hey, hi guys. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And my name is Surya, and I am doing my PhD in imaging science, and I work on SEM. And I kind of had a question about switching careers within industry, like at all instance of time, like at any point in your career, if you decide that you want to switch domains, whether you are in industry or in academia, how should one go about it? Like if I'm working on something on my PhD, but I decide I don't like it, and I just want to change my domain within the bounds of what is permissible or acceptable, how should one go about that in academia and industry?
I can say a little bit. I mean, I started off my career as an engineer. It's typically working in an engineering department, sitting behind a drawing board or a CAD system, and I kind of grew tired of being in the same environment every day, day in and day out, and kind of wanted to. And I bought things from some salespeople, and I kind of liked the job I saw them doing, because they were kind of acting like consultants, coming in and kind of educating me as a potential buyer as to what their product could do. whether it could solve our problems and trying to figure out what the best solution was. And so I kind of like that. So I started trying to get a career in sales. I wanted to kind of transition over into sales, but the problem was at that time, everybody wanted somebody with sales experience. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I've got all this. I mean, you're always selling, whether you're a salesperson or an engineer or a scientist, you're selling your ideas, your solution, whatever. You're selling something, like Lucille was trying to explain earlier. You're still doing the selling process, or convincing other people or interviewing them to solve an issue. So the way I ended up transitioning was I actually, one of the companies that I bought some equipment, it was a predecessor for Thermo Fisher Scientific. I bought some equipment from them, and then they were looking for somebody. So I was like, well, I know your equipment already. Now all I got to do is learn the sales. So they kind of looked the other way and said, okay, you don't have any sales experience, but we know you, and we feel like, you could come in and step into this role. And I made that transition from being an engineer to being salesperson, or sales engineer, I guess is what I moved to. Yeah, it's not to make a career change like that was kind of a career change, going from a 8 to 5 engineer to a 24/7 sales guy that's always working. Your brain's always running, trying to figure out where the next paycheck's going to come from. And so that was a big, it's still a career change in a way. So it's never simple, but you just got to find somebody that's willing to take a chance on you and use some of those skills you've got to convince them that you're the right person for the opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I would say there's no right or wrong reason to do anything. There's no cookie cutter formula for, getting a job. If you are going to be working for many, many, many years, so make sure that you're happy doing what you're doing. Find something that is your passion, that you love to do. That's important for your lifestyle, for your family. There's a lot of aspects to finding something that's important for you to do. Obviously, you want to like it. So if you don't like what you're doing, or if you see opportunity somewhere else, then just, go for it.
Yeah, one thing I would add is, what you're talking about sounds like normal life, right? You sound like, how do I do this thing? It's so strange. But you talk to people, and you won't find almost nobody who's still doing the same thing they were doing 10 years ago. Think that your situation evolves over time. And if you're 90% of the way through something, finish it. That's going to be the best for your next step, is showing the next person that next thing you're going to be doing, that you were able to finish something and take a project through to completion. But if you're just getting started on it and you don't like it, there's nothing wrong with changing. And once you finish something, or you get to some kind of milestone, it's just normal expected thing that you're going to be doing something else next. Everybody should know that.
So I asked that question because, like, for example, if someone has a degree in optics, they can go into microscopy or astronomy, right? But if they are already like I am working in microscopy, but I decide that I want to switch in astronomy, how difficult is that from a practical point of view?
Well, I can tell you, being in charge of hiring at Neon, is that if we only hired people who had experience building electron microscopes, there would be nobody available to hire, except from our competition. And those people are already doing, they already have jobs and they're not looking. So, changing careers, changing areas of work, that's expected. There's not going to be an industry track job that does the exact same thing as your PhD work. It's expected that it'll be somewhat different.
Okay, thank you.
I can ask a question, Lara. I'm Nirja. I'm a postdoc at the Pacific Northwest National Lab, and I actually feel like I just went through a career change, going from PhD to government lab, I guess. But my question is, I've heard from multiple sources that you should only do like 2 postdocs before you consider a transition into industry. Lucille, I know you said you were even a professor for 10 years. So was it extra challenging for you to make that transition, or is that just a myth?
It was extremely scary. But yeah, to leave kind of a tenured full professor position, a lot of people thought I was crazy. But you know, you got to do what your heart tells you to do and what you feel is right. And that was very scary, but starting my own company was even scarier. So, but you know, you do your homework too. You don't just jump into something blindly, right? Which I did. I did a lot of my homework. I knew what the transition would look like, and you know, what's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario for me was, okay, I don't like it, and I go find another job somewhere, or go back to what I was doing, or whatever. But for me, it was a very even though it was scary, it was very much thought out, and I had it very well positioned in my head on what it would look like. So but yeah, anytime you go from either, you know, your PhD to a postdoc, or one postdoc to another postdoc, or even when I first started at the University of Central Florida, that was going from postdoc. Every time you jump and change, it's both scary and exciting, right? Because it's scary because you're leaving something comfortable, but it's exciting because you're starting something new. So I would look at it as that kind of a challenge, and look at it like that.
I don't think there's any rules for this kind of thing. I mean, if you want to do something else, do something else. There's nobody who's going to say, oh, you've done 2 postdocs already, so you can't transition to industry. They're going to be looking for the skill set, the publication record. I mean, whatever figures of merit are appropriate in your, you know, in industry, publication records tend to be kind of smaller, but project accomplishments may be bigger, or you at least have something similar to point at. So I mean, people are going to be looking to see that you excelled at what you did, not saying, oh, you know, you did too many postdocs or something like that.
Yeah, if you can find a co-op arrangement where you can work while you are in industry. I've seen some of our most successful customers that have, you know, made a good go of it in industry. You know, they were doing co-op work while they were still doing their PhD or their master's, and so they got a really good taste of what it was like. And then they can go back and say, you know what, these are the things I need to learn better now, because I see what I'm missing when I'm out there working. And so if there's a co-op program, obviously there's not a co-op program at Pacific Northwest, but if you know, a lot of universities, if you can find a co-op position while you're in school, I think that would be extremely valuable.
Great, thank you.
Any other question from the audience? Avinash, you want to ask anything, or?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, I'm Avinash. I'm a graduate student at MIT. I have a question about entrepreneurial aspect of it, which Lucille and Mike talked about. So what would be like a point where we can think about like, okay, let's go and start a company, or what, is this something just an idea, or you have also ways around, like, you know, what are the other challenges, and how things worked out about for you, if you can share.
Yeah, for me, the first thing I did was start consulting, and that's definitely useful if you've already had several years experience doing something, whether it's academia or industry, because it's important to have a good network of people that you can already go to and say, hey, I know that you need some help in this. Can you, hire me as a consultant to do XYZ or whatever. So consulting, I would say starting right out of your graduate degree, in my opinion, would be kind of difficult, just because you need that networking sort of folks to be able to draw your business from. On the other hand, if you have an idea for a product and you see a need for something, then I would say, go ahead and go for it. It's still an entirely different process. You still need to then work in the field. You have to know people in the field, or you have to know how to get a hold of people that would be interested in your product. But that's a totally different thing. And yeah, and then there's whole different ways to protect your product through patents, through proprietary customer secrets. Then you're opening up a whole another can of worms, but that goes into another direction. But certainly doable. I know one of the advantages, for example, I know a lot of colleagues that are still in academia. They have the security of working at, for example, a university, but then do sort of the entrepreneurial stuff on the side. And then you can take advantage with a small company with the SBIR grants that Tracy talked about earlier, and not have to worry about kind of feeding yourself off of this startup company, because you still have a full-time job doing something else. And so that's another way that you can do it as well.
Yeah, I would just add to that, don't limit yourself to searching just for, all the known names like you think of, like Apple or Boeing or the federal government or whatever. There's so many small, stable, and really fast growing small companies, especially in the area of energy, battery storage research. It is just amazing the activity that we see there, as well as in additive manufacturing. Some of one of our customers, they've got jobs posted on their website. They do additive manufacturing, and there's only 3 people there, but they are growing like crazy, and they've got some of the neatest technology that's come along in a long time. And those companies need people. They need you a lot worse than Boeing needs you. A company like Boeing or Apple or the federal government, but it's a nice stable job, but they probably don't need you as badly as that small company that's on the cutting edge of new developments. They really need people that can do multiple things and solve problems fast and come up with great new ideas, and not have the same old tired ideas like Tracy was talking about. If you hire somebody with TEM experience, you're just going to hear the same ideas that they've seen. But if you hire somebody new coming out of another field, you get a whole different perspective sometimes. And so yeah, don't be afraid to get out there and look at these smaller startup. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. I mean, join some groups, look at the people that are in those groups, and then, look at the companies. If it's a company you don't recognize, then go find the company's website and see what they do. You'd be amazed at some of the companies that are out there doing just some of the neatest stuff. And there may be, 5 people, they may be, 100 person company, still a very small company. I mean, my company, myself, we're only 5 people, and so we're really small. But we get exposed to all these really cutting edge companies that are doing neat things that I think, anybody would find that very, very rewarding to work at a place like that, where what you have to offer is going to be so valuable. So.
Well, I would just add, from running a company perspective, if you're planning to start a company, it means you've got an idea for a product that people will want to buy, and that's a given. But just think about it and make sure that you have an edge in the market some way, because you're going to be competing. Maybe it's something totally new, but there's, you want to make sure that your way of doing it is somehow has an advantage over the other ways that already exist, and that's going to be competitive enough to be able to charge enough that you can generate a business, a cash flow that can support whatever you're trying to do. So just, I would say everything is very competitive. So just make sure that you've got some kind of competitive edge and a clear idea about what that is. And that's something that you want to do, because it's very different once you start having to, spend the majority of your time dealing with, business, marketing, and stuff like that. You'll be surprised by how little time is left over for your however that idea came about in the first place.
Thank you.
Anybody and the other two in the audience have a question or that they would like to ask? All right. Oh, go for it.
Oh, hello. Got a quick one. So I'm Stephen, currently a research professor over at University of Pittsburgh. And I know that Lucille, you and I know Neon, there's a lot of interaction with various research groups in academia. Is that like, do groups tend to come to you, or do, as a company, you're saying, hey, we want to develop this thing, or we're developing this new thing, and then you reach out to, say, other groups? I'm curious about how those kind of interactions are instituted, and like kind of who decides how they get funded, how much of that do you tend to do, that kind of thing.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Stephen. I would say it can be either or both, depending upon what it is. So if I come up with a new idea, a new product, and in order to get it out there, I might work with some either industrial or university partners and basically give it to them and say, hey, can you try this out for me? Can maybe publish some papers using it. And I've also had situations where people have come to me and said, hey, this is really great, but can you add this, this, and this, and this to it? So it'll work basically both ways, depending upon what it is, I would say. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can kind of expand on that. Basic idea is the same as what Lucille said. I mean, it goes both ways, but be thinking about what's in it for everybody. I mean, everybody has the same, the idea that you're advancing science is great, and that's a certain level of motivation. But if you want to actually devote resources to something, then you have to have a practical plan for how that's all going to, who's going to benefit in what ways. And so, like Lucille had said, sometimes you've got a prototype product and you want to promote it. So you get it in the hands of a university researcher who can publish a paper using it. Well, that's good for everybody. You got to keep in mind that that's going to be best accomplished with somebody who has a strong record in that area of development. And so or in a potential customer collaboration, or in an existing customer collaboration, thinking about an upgrade. Or so I guess just having some kind of, first of all, having a good idea, like from the science perspective, and then also having a good business relationship that where there's some indication that this project idea could go somewhere, that there's next steps for it. It's not going to an obscure journal that no one will read and have 2 citations.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. So Tracy just reminded me of a point that I'm going to kind of throw out there. So when folks are on the when they're in the market to buy something technical, usually, of course, in the microscopy field, everybody wants a discount, and everybody wants a discount because they say, well, if you put it in my lab, I'll give you access to it, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? Everybody says that. Okay. But Tracy's laughing because he knows he's heard this before. And he made the point that you're going to work with somebody who's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck, right? It has to be a win-win situation. And I am going to choose to work with collaborators who are well-known or are doing cutting edge stuff and or can make the biggest impact for me, as well as will my widget help the researcher do their state-of-the-art research and do some science with it. So it's gonna go back and forth, and yeah, so that's a big indicator business-wise as to who you collaborate with.
Yeah, to answer one of your part of your questions about do we go to the customer, or do we wait for the customers to come to us? I know in our situation, we're more of a reactive mode where we wait until somebody shows an interest, especially nowadays. I think that having the word sales in your title is never a good thing, because most people, the last thing they want to do is have a salesman walk in the door and bring out his catalogs and start showing them everything that they may not even have an interest in. So we try to put the word out there through great avenues like Microscopy Today, and now we've got this great thing called the internet with Google and Bing web searches. So we want to show up there, and so if people have an interest, they can find us. That's our hardest part is, there's just so many people. How do they find us? A needle in the haystack of all the things that are out there. So don't be afraid of contacting all the companies that are out there and seeing what they can offer you, and go for it from there.
Yeah, I mean, like Mike's saying, nobody buys a microscope because they happen to be walking by and it was on sale. I mean, it just doesn't work. Like, people go out looking for what they want and they find it. And so you want to have the resources available out there that people can find what they're looking for, and hopefully it's you. But you're not going to have any luck walking in and saying, "Oh, here, sign this and you get a free pizza." Like, it's not how it works. Might work for new credit cards for undergraduates or something, but not microscopes.
It'd have to be a very expensive pizza if you're going to entice them to buy a full TEM. Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. This has been some good discussion. We're getting about to the end of the time, but I know that Tracy, you had briefly mentioned this, but if each of you wouldn't mind sharing where you post job openings and how to get in, how to find job openings for your company.
Neon.com/careers. We'll be posting at the microscopy and microanalysis mega booth also.
I also have like a brief question. Is it okay if I look you guys up on LinkedIn and follow up?
Lovejoy@neon.com. Save you the effort.
Yeah, you can definitely look me up on LinkedIn. Connect through me, and then then go through and look at some of the connections that I've got. And you'll see a lot of other people in the industry, but you'll see about over half or more. There's other people in the microscopy industry that are in similar positions as I am, but then you'll also see a lot of our customers and people that do. Can you see the kind of companies they are? That's what I mentioned there earlier was, look at those people and say, well, where do they work at? And then what does this company do? And it'll give you ideas about, the kind of companies that hire people with that kind of background. And then you can start looking for other similar companies in the same field if it's something that interests you. But yeah, LinkedIn's a great place to look for work, I think. And it doesn't have to be a job that's posted. You find a company that that, hey, that company's doing something I'd really like to be involved in. There's nothing wrong with just contacting them and getting your CV or resume in their hands, and or finding, even doing more detective work rather than just using the shotgun approach of throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there. See if you can figure out who the R&D manager is. If you want to work in R&D, figure out who the R&D manager is at that company and try to connect with them through LinkedIn, network. That, and I'm not a LinkedIn promoter here, but I sound like it. But, you can find the actual person that you might end up working for and look at their background and see, is that somebody I would, take a more proactive approach about finding those kind of careers rather than just waiting for some. Because usually what I find is that when something's posted as a job ad on one of the job websites or somebody's career page, it's because they couldn't find anybody else, and they're like, okay, we don't know, we've exhausted our networking. Let's just go out there and throw a post up and see who shows up. I know in the past when I've done that at other companies I was working at, it never seemed to work out very well. The people we usually end up hiring we found them through a networking process. So don't be afraid to get out there and network, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Great, thank you, good advice. Lucille, anything to add to that, or where you can find jobs for your company and where you hire people?
I'm not currently hiring, but you can find me on LinkedIn, lucille.glucy.
Great. Well, that's about our time. I really want to thank all of our panelists for answering the questions and the good conversations. And again, like they've all said, you can find them on LinkedIn and continue more conversations with them and more research on their companies. So thank you very much for our attendees for viewing and for asking questions. And thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for organizing it.
Yeah.
yes, thank you for organizing this. And student council is one of the best things MSA ever did, in my opinion. So we loved supporting the student council as much as we can. So
Great.
Yeah, agreed. And this is a great place to begin your networking skills and opportunities. So thank you.
Well, thanks everybody. Have a great day.
thank you.
Bye.